Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Thanks for tuning back into Twisted Tales, folks. Hope everybody's having a wicked weekend. The work week's done. Pick back up on Monday. Oh joy. So, episode 51. This one will be actually a special request. We're going to talk about the Mark Stobbe murder case. So, this tale begins in the early 2000s. And then, 42-year-old Mark Stobbe had moved his family from Regina, Saskatchewan to St. Andrews, Manitoba. So St. Andrews, being a rural community, it was actually kind of a nice little change-up for the family. Mark's wife, Beverly Rowbotham, and their two sons. Now, Mark was moving to Manitoba for a job as a communications strategist. And this is a job that would include, project management responsibilities. His job prior to this was senior advisor to Roy Romanon, the Premier of Saskatchewan, Canada. Neighbors remember their family like any other normal family. Nothing out of the ordinary. Mark was a busy man, and he left his house early in the morning for work, and he'd work late into the evenings. Now, his wife and two sons stayed home in the house, and this was located pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And this started to cause a little bit of stress on the marriage, because the house was a bit of a fixer-upper, and it was a little beaten up. Now, with Mark working longer hours at work, he didn't have the time to fix things around the house. So this caused additional strain on the relationship, as he was spending most of his time at the office than he was at home with the family. So the feeling of loneliness was starting to bother Beverly. Nothing seemed to change, even after the couple talked and bickered here and there about their current situation. On October 24th, 2000, Beverly went with her youngest son to do some grocery shopping at Safeway in Selkirk, Manitoba that afternoon. This was only about 12 kilometers from the family home. The youngest boy started to act up while shopping, and the family left and then didn't get any groceries. Beverly was going to go a little later on, just to finish the grocery shopping when Mark got home so he could watch the kids. Now, Mark worked a long shift that night, so he returned to his home on River Road. Beverly left to do the grocery shopping, and then Mark went up to lay down, and he ended up dozing off with one of his sons. Some time had passed, and Mark woke up. He noticed that Beverly wasn't home yet from the store. Worried that something had happened to her, as it was 2:30 in the morning, Mark started calling nearby hospitals and then police to report her missing. So he filed a missing persons report at 2:37 a.m. He also made a phone call to his wife's sister, Betty, and Betty only lived about 10 minutes away. She drove over to the house and met Mark at the front door. So she remembers him having a bit of an acne breakout, and he looked a little flushed as he had red pimples on his face. Police ended up starting the search for Betty. They talked to Mark a little bit, and Mark and Betty ended up chatting for a little bit. The kids were still asleep, and Mark, out of nowhere, kind of just skipped out to the backyard for about 30 or 40 minutes, as Betty recalls. She remembers him using a garden hose in the backyard to wash down some stuff, and she thought that was a little weird. I mean, who heads out in the backyard at 3 a.m. just to water some stuff? When he returned from the garage, police showed up and Mark went to go greet them. Upon questioning by police officials, he received a phone call from his office phone at the house, and the phone call was news about Beverly. She was found dead in her car, with massive blunt force trauma wounds to her head. Her vehicle, a Ford Crown Victoria, was found parked at the gas station in Selkirk. Her purse was located in the car, her wallet was missing, and a ring was missing from her finger. So now an investigation was underway into the Stobbe household. Investigators found fragments of her skull and clumps of her hair in the garage right where her Crown Victoria was parked. Looking around the garage, police noticed 2 large bloodstains on the floor, one on the wall, and along with some blood-soaked tissues and towels. Now this was evidence that the killer had tried to clean up the crime scene. So back in Selkirk, when the abandoned Crown Victoria was found, police found her purse with little speckles of blood on it. Her wallet, that wasn't located in the car earlier, was found down a bank by Red River, just a little ways away from the gas station. Initially, police thought poor Beverly was murdered when Mark and the kids were sleeping. Now they questioned as to why the killer would put the body in the Ford, drive over to Selkirk, and even how the killer had gotten to the crime scene to begin with. They focused their attention on Mark, and they questioned him about his whereabouts and what he'd been up to that night. So Mark was under suspicion by police, and when they questioned him, he denied having anything to do with his wife's death. And even when questions arose about marital problems, he just stated that they weren't having any, but they did bicker every so often, just like couples did. But that was nothing out of the ordinary. Police started to collect DNA samples from the crime scene at the Stobbe residence. So this put Stobbe into a tight corner. According to DNA evidence from the crime scene, the blood stains that were found in the garage and the backyard were from Beverly. The blood stains found on the towel and tissues belonged to Mark. Also, a few of the stains had a mixture of his and his wife's blood. So there was DNA evidence also found that were from an unidentified male. And the little spots of blood that were on Beverly's purse, they also came from an unidentified male. So the investigation went on. The investigators gathered evidence, and they studied the scene, and they made reports. Now, in 2001, police turned their full attention on Mark as the primary suspect for the murder of his wife, Beverly. And they wanted to check out his story of the night of what happened when his wife went to the grocery store with the kids. Police had asked Mark about the day in question, the wife's trip to the grocery store. He mentioned that Beverly didn't complete her shopping because one of the boys had misbehaved. But a store surveillance tape shows Beverly in the store for over an hour, and the cash register receipt had indicated that she spent $108.32, which is pretty much the average amount that she spends according to bank statements. Now, police were also a little weary on Mark's events the night of his wife's murder, so they kind of thought it was kind of incriminating, because he told some that he fell asleep watching a ball game, or that he fell asleep with one of his sons. His story was never consistent. And in January 2001, the RCMP had obtained a warrant to allow them to tap Mark's home telephone, and they'd eventually listen to thousands of hours of recordings. But police ended up finding nothing incriminating on the wiretaps. On February 28, 2001, police listened to a call between Mark and Betty Rowbotham, his former sister-in-law. She told him how police had obtained physical evidence from his backyard. To that, Mark replied, quote, "Damn it all, I feel horrible." Over time, the case would eventually hit a wall and would lay dormant for several years. But this would change in 2008. Now, almost 8 years after his wife's murder, Mark Stobbe was charged by the Crown for second-degree murder. He was arrested, he made bail, and pled not guilty to the charges. Fast forward to January 16, 2012. Mark's trial was now underway in Manitoba's Court of Queen's Bench in Winnipeg. Representing the Crown was Wendy Dawson. In her opening statement to the jury, she laid it all out for the prosecution's theory of the case. Mark had a heated argument with his wife, which started in the backyard of their home. He then hit her in the head 16 times with a hatchet, drug her body into the garage, and hit her again. He then stuffed her lifeless body into her Crown Victoria and then drove her body to the gas station in Selkirk. Now, he also shoved a bicycle into the trunk. He parked the car at the gas station so he could use the bike to drive back home. Now, along his bike ride, he chucked Beverly's wallet by Red River just to kind of lead police to believe that the killer robbed her and just to throw them off a little bit. He removed his wife's ring and he rode back to the home, and this was about a 15-kilometer trip. Once home, he waited a few hours before calling police and his sister-in-law Betty. Mark's attorney, one Tom Killeen, he told the jury Beverly was bludgeoned to death by an unidentified intruder who lied in wait at the family's house, making note of the DNA that was on her purse and the unidentified DNA in the garage. So over the next several weeks, 70 people took the stand. Several witnesses testified to seeing an overweight man riding a bike between the areas of Selkirk and St. Andrews. During the course of the trial, none of the witnesses could specifically identify the man on the bike. But what are the odds of that, though? A woman's murdered the same night they see a guy riding a bike at the middle of the nighttime, right? So on March 7, 2012, defense put on its case. So this depended almost entirely on the defendant taking the stand on his own behalf. If one single juror believed anything Mark had to say out of his mouth, there would be no conviction to be had. If all jurors believed that he must be telling the truth, then there would be an acquittal. Now, while under examination by attorney Tom Killeen, Mark denied killing Beverly. He said, quote, "I spend a lot of nights looking out the window, just wondering. When I learned of my wife's death, it was confirmation of my worst fears. What it had meant was, I was 50 or 60 feet away when she was killed. I should have been able to stop it. I was completely useless at helping her." After Mark said all this, he completely broke down in tears while on the stand. The next day, Crown Prosecutor Wendy Dawson began cross-examination of the defendant, asking Mark why he hadn't filed an insurance claim on his wife's missing ring, valued at $7,000. "You didn't make a claim," she said, "because the ring was never stolen. You took it off her hand after you brutally killed her." Now, Mark replied that he didn't file a claim because he didn't care about the value of the ring. So he also pushed the defendant to admit their marital problems, and that the stress that was coming between them both, also questioning his long work hours and how it took a toll on their relationship. Now, Mark replied with, "She wanted me around more, but understood that working long hours were part of his job, and she never once mentioned to him about a career change." Now, the cross-examination went on for 5 full days. She kept on him the entire time, which kind of had like a negative effect, because this risked making Mark an object of sympathy in the eyes of some jurors. Now, on March 22nd, 2012, the attorneys made their closing arguments. The prosecutor said she didn't want Mark to get away with the perfect murder of his wife, and the circumstantial evidence against him was very overwhelming. While he was on the stand, she remembers that Mark had all the traits of a dishonest and lying juror, and he couldn't keep his story straight. She mentioned that surely he would have been able to hear the cries from his wife if she was being beaten, or the commotion in the garage, or the car leaving the garage for that matter. She called this a crime of rage. In closing argument, defense attorney Tom Killeen admitted that there were reasons for police to suspect his client, but suspicion isn't enough to convict a man for murder. The Crown, he said, has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt, and Mr. Stobbe has nothing to prove. On March 27, 2012, after 82 witnesses and hundreds of hours of testimony, Judge Chris Martin gave instructions for the jury, and Mark's life would now be decided by 12 jurors. Now, after deliberating for 2 days, the jury found Mark Stobbe not guilty. There was no really any solid evidence of motive, no murder weapon was ever found, and there was a weak testimony about the unknown DNA on the wife's purse that didn't come into play in the minds of the jury. Some jurors believed he killed his wife, but proof and belief are two different things, right? So now Mark Stobbe gets to roam the streets as a free man, and an innocent woman is now dead and had everything taken from her. Like, she'll never get to see her two boys grow up, graduate, marry, or any of the stuff that we sometimes take for granted in our everyday lives. Now, some recall Mark as like a large and friendly fellow, a very helpful human being. Others recall him as very smart, and he can kind of have like a certain sway over those he conversated with. Now, Mark had a plan to publish 2 books after his acquittal on the murder trial and on details of his wife's death. And this didn't please Beverly's family members, because they thought it brought nothing but drama. Now, the 2 books that will be titled and published will be No Body Homicides, The Evolution of Investigation and Prosecution. The other would be Lessons from Remand. Now, this uses theories from sociology and psychology. And Mark was a teacher in the town that I'm in, where he studied sociology. A few of my buddies actually heard of this case. And some of their friends even actually took its class. So, even before Lakeland College, he taught at various other colleges throughout BC. And he was a smart individual. He had 25 years experience in communications, he planned for government and political organizations, and he even had 5 years experience running the Saskatchewan Craft Council. He even obtained his master's and PhD in sociology and criminology at the University of Saskatchewan. Now, during his time in jail, upon waiting prosecution, that's where he got the idea for the book, but he stated that he didn't go to jail to use it as a book opportunity. No shit. Now, Mark Stobbe, actually, he needed to make some money somehow, right, with the books. But as much as the trial and notoriety pretty much crippled him in the public eye, he stated that after the trial, he was pretty much unemployable. He was broke. And the family home was sold to cover the cost of legal bills, his government pension plan was drained, and he stayed afloat from student loans he got from pursuing a master's degree. So, he said the process plucked me like a chicken of finances. Now, he did try and seek some sort of payment to be compensated from all the courtroom trials and shit, but it only applied to people who were wrongfully convicted. And his boys are happy and healthy, they're well adjusted, but he doesn't want them to be victims, like he wants them to go out and live their lives. And they do talk about their mother often, and relive memories from Pictures of Beverly. Now, as we wind things down, Mark said that he lost a lot of friends over the course of all this, and even his in-laws believe that he's guilty. So he finds it strangely enough that even when he was out on bail for 4 years, he found that a lot more doors closed for him. Like, lots of people stopped talking to him and shit, and like, this was even after he was charged and even after his acquittal. It was pretty much just him and the kids. Now, some people still had that whole he's innocent until proven guilty mentality. And he knows that some people think that he's gotten away with murder. And Mark, to this day, still states that he had a great marriage, and he was a very blessed man for having her in his life. Over time, he began to date, and he said he hasn't clicked with any woman yet, so I guess we'll see in due time. And all that Mark wants now is to move on with his life. And that, my friends, is my little tale of Mark Stobbe and his murder case. And all these cases that I cover, like, they're gonna have different endings. I know I'm not gonna please everybody on these, but I just do them because I enjoy doing them. And, you know, it gives you guys something to listen to, and I get to know different shit through old Canada and wherever else I'm covering, right? So thanks for emailing me your tales and everything. You're all awesome. And if you want to hit follow and subscribe, you'll get my next episodes whenever I publish them, instead of after a few days or whatever. So I'm going to pop on some news interviews here about this case too, and we'll get that shit figured out. Well, it's been a slice, folks. Thanks for tuning back in. Take care.
Lessons from Remand will be published next spring. It's a story that has caused Barb Kilpatrick so much pain. Her sister, Beverly Rowbotham, was murdered 12 years ago. After a high-profile murder trial earlier this year, Rowbotham's husband, Mark Stobbe, was found not guilty of killing her. He says he soon became the main suspect. But watching Stobbe describe his side of this story for the first time doesn't impress Kilpatrick.
I think it's quite a bit of drama.
In his first interview since the trial, Stobbe revealed he's back at university in Saskatchewan, the author of 2 books about his experiences with the justice system. He says he'll put any profits towards his legal fees.
Being on trial for murder is not a profitable exercise.
I think it would be very noble of him to donate the money to a scholarship in Beverly's name. He could donate any money that he garnished from these books to hire somebody to find the real killer.
Kilpatrick doesn't plan to read either book and isn't surprised to hear Stobbe's had a tough time finding work.
There is a court of public opinion out there.
Rowbotham was killed in her family's backyard. Her body moved to a family car and abandoned at this service station in Selkirk. No murder weapon was ever found. No witnesses saw her death. Back in March, Stobbe's not guilty verdict came as a shock to Rowbotham's sisters.
Did somebody from space land in the backyard and do this?
Kilpatrick says she tries to make sure Rowbotham's 2 sons know she was a wonderful mom.
The only victim in this scenario is Beverly and her 2 boys.
That's the message she hopes others keep in mind as well. Betty Rowbotham testified yesterday she did not know the phone call was being recorded, but in it she reveals new details to Mark Stobbe about the police investigation into her sister's death, including that police believed Beverly Rowbotham was killed in her own St. Andrews backyard. Here's how Stobbe reacts to what Rowbotham tells him.
Basically what they said.
The tape was played for the jury yesterday. Later, they have this exchange.
You've always said you always felt that.
Well, the reason I thought that was because of all the tarps in the backyard when they were doing the search of the house.
Rowbotham testified yesterday Stobbe's pauses and sighs in the call were longer than usual.
At least you know then.
Oh man, I feel horrible.
Today, Betty Rowbotham's husband, Ed Bachavich, testified about the night Beverly died. He told court he drove around Selkirk with his son looking for her, going past the Safeway where Stobbe said she went shopping, and near the service station where Rowbotham's body was later found in the family's Crown Victoria. Bachavich told court he didn't see the car at the time, later saying it was well camouflaged and the area was very dark. Maybe that's why we didn't see it, and maybe that's a good thing. In cross-examination, Bachavich testified to conversations with Stobbe following his wife's death. He told court Stobbe said he felt insecure in the River Road home. He got a dog. He told Bachavich it was hard to hear people drive up to the house and thought maybe someone had come in the yard. Bachavich testified he stayed in regular contact with Stobbe after Rowbotham's death, telling court, yes, he was family. Next week, the Crown expects to call more relatives of both Beverly Rowbotham and Mark Stobbe.
Twisted Tales.